A Christmas Story by Andrew Y.M. Kwong, Womberall 2260, narrated by David Tredinnick. This story is also narrated in Cantonese. In the early 1970s, before HEX existed, I spent the Christmas holidays working as an assistant nurse to put myself through medical school. I relieved the regular nurses so that they could celebrate the festivities at home with their families. At the Repatriation General Hospital Concord, the RGH, rows of long wooden houses linked by covered corridors meandered towards Canada Bay on the grand Parramatta River. Endless sea breezes never failed to find their way to provide dearly needed relief for the ward's occupants when the fans were inadequate to cool down those poorly insulated wards on hot Australian summer days. Eric was a badly wounded World War I veteran I helped care for. Like many long-term patients in the ward in those days, his file went into several volumes. Although wheelchair-bound, he seldom complained of his pains or ailments, let alone mentioned much about his war-acquired injuries. Hush stories in the ward told how he was gassed several times but survived, only later to suffer gunshot wounds. The ward had been his home since his repatriation, as it had been for the other disabled veterans of past wars, recent and old. He read a lot and mostly kept to himself. Occasionally he hummed his favourite songs to amuse himself. He called his wheelchair his chariot. Eric rarely had visitors, except for the dedicated legacy volunteers who brought a basket of goodies several times a year, especially the week before Christmas. Eric was always grateful. By Christmas Eve every year, most of the ward's residents had left to spend the big day with families or friends. As usual, Eric was one of the few who were left behind. I always remember the summer of 1975, and the big day was approaching. I counted 5 years since my last Christmas with my family. Working as an assistant nurse relieved some sadness of missing the family, especially when caring for people like Eric. Seeing the seldom smile on his face on this special day made me forget my misery. Arriving at the ward early that morning, I could hear Eric humming quietly in his wheelchair. It's a long way to Tipperary, it's a long way to go. It's a long way to Tipperary, to the sweetest girl I know. He beamed with pleasure as he spotted me entering the ward. Without his usual greeting, he announced that he would surely be picked up for Christmas this time. He told me this in all the Christmases I had worked at RGH. Then, like the first Christmas I met him, he would insist on putting on his best jacket for his visitors. I could spend more time with Eric as the ward was quieter now. Meticulously, I gave him a good shave with a new razor blade, trimmed the fast-thinning sideburns and his proud moustache to his satisfaction, splashed aftershave with a double dose, and polished his leather shoes so shiny that you could see the reflection of his grin that outshone the ward's colourful decorations. Again, as before, he would direct me like a commanding officer to wheel him to the foyer of the main building, waiting to be picked up. I did this for Eric, like a soldier taking his command seriously. As in past years, I knew no one had come for Eric. When noon arrived, I went to the front foyer to fetch Eric and bring him back to his ward for his Christmas dinner. With quiet dignity on his face and a fading glow, we nodded and understood. I gingerly manoeuvred his chariot and headed for those long, winding passages. Before long, I found myself humming with Eric as we navigated towards the ward. It's a long way to Tipperary, it's a long way to go. It's a long way to Tipperary, to the sweetest girl I know. By the time we reached the ward, a handful of residents and staff had already assembled themselves around the dining table, decorated with colourful tinsel, bells and holly under a tall Christmas tree we had put up weeks earlier, glowing and chatting away. Eric and I would now be singing our song out loud, and the whole ward would join in, erupting into a rousing tune of festive spirit. After passing my last medical school examination, I did not return to work as an assistant nurse. I declined Matron Flower's invitation letter to return to RGH that summer, as I could spend Christmas with my family before embarking on my medical profession. But I did miss Eric and his unyielding spirit. In the decades that follow, the image of Eric in his chariot at the front foyer of the RGH alerts me to the quiet sufferings many of my patients may have if I fail to listen to their medical complaints. Eric's song hems in whenever I face drawbacks or challenges, nudging me to find solutions for my patients and be a better doctor. The end.